Welcome to the Apologetics Guy Show. It's the podcast that helps you find clear answers to tough questions about God, Jesus, and the Bible, and then helps you to better explain your faith with both courage and compassion. If we're just meeting, I'm Dr. Mikel Del Rosario. I'm the host of this podcast, and I'm also a professor of Bible and theology at the Moody Bible Institute right here in downtown Chicago, and I want to welcome you to my independent show. Well, today our topic on the show is bridge building apologetics. How can we better engage with people who see Christianity differently, sometimes very, very differently? My guest on the show today is Lindsey Mendenwalt. Lindsey is the Director of Operations at Mama Bear Apologetics, and she also wrote a book called Bridge Building Apologetics. Bridge Building Apologetics, How to Get Along Even When We Disagree. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Mikel. I'm super excited to be here. I kind of wish I was in Chicago, though. I know, because it's such a pretty city, and I really enjoy seeing photos of it. And I'm in Iowa, and it's beautiful here, too. But there's something about experiencing a city every once in a while. I'll be in Boston in a couple of weeks, so maybe I'll get that out of my system. But it's good to be with you virtually, at least.
Yeah, well, I'd love to have you one day if you come visit us here at the Moody Bible Institute on campus. Love to give you a tour, and maybe we can do another follow-up podcast in the studio live.
Awesome. That would be great.
Well, one thing about the word apologetics for people is it can sometimes sound intimidating to some Christians, but right off the bat, your book looks very approachable. I really like the hand-drawn bridge there. It's a quick summer read. I read it in a couple days, just here and there by the Sun Deck, where I posted that picture on Instagram from, of the cover of your book. I love that idea of bridge building apologetics. Talk to us about what it means to build a bridge and how can we do that?
Yeah, I'm so glad you like the cover. It makes me happy when people recognize the beauty of the cover, because the cover is really important, as you know. We do tend to judge books by their covers, even though we're not supposed to do that.
That's right.
But when we're reading books, we really are in bookstores drawn to those covers that are pretty or speak to us. And I'm really glad that you liked it. As far as bridge building, Mikel, I think I've been a bit of a bridge builder my whole life. It's something my parents sort of instilled in me. My parents were missionaries, and so we moved out of the States when I was 6 years old, and I lived in Mexico, Guatemala, and Belize at various times for about 2.5 years or so. And during that time, as a young person being exposed to a completely different culture than the United States. And then when we came back to the States, we lived in what is now my hometown, Laredo, Texas, which is right on the border of Mexico and the United States. And so the way that I was raised was really full of culture. And I was able to interact with people who might not look like me pretty regularly. And as I got older, interactions outside of my Christian circle began to grow as well. I started to meet people who weren't Christians, had different faiths or no faith at all. And navigating those kinds of relationships, at first it was, as a young person, maybe I shouldn't have friendships with people who aren't Christians. And then as I got older, into young adulthood and adulthood, I recognized that there are ways to be genuine friends with people with whom we disagree, even if we disagree on those really big things like religion or politics here in the United States, or even outside of the United States. Politics is a little big. But thinking about that and wondering to myself, how do I have genuine relationships with people, but also a place where I can share my faith and share what I perceive as true with people who might be interested in knowing about the hope within me. And that's how I think the book was born.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you gave some tips in the book. I know the whole book is about this, but what are some tips for building those bridges?
Yeah, so this is supposed to be a practical text, right? It's not a book that folks will pick up and say, okay, it's got 12 apologetics arguments that I can learn. It's not one of those kinds of books. It's when you learn how to defend your faith, it's then how to actually have those conversations with people. So you can learn the argument, for example, about why the Bible is reliable, or the many arguments why the Bible is reliable. But then how do you, in practical conversation, have those talks? How can you share that information with others? And that's kind of what this book is about. I think in our culture, Mikkel, we've sort of lost the art of dialogue. So I spend quite a bit of time talking about how to ask questions and how to listen well. Those are two things that I love to teach my students at Northwestern College, where I adjunct. I teach a public speaking class and some writing courses. And in those classes, I interact with some first-year students. And first years, they're eager to learn, as you probably know. And they're also kind of figuring out what their own perspectives are. They're coming away from their homes maybe for the first time and hearing different perspectives for the first time, and sort of navigating that. And so in that sphere, it's really easy to then say, we need to ask good questions, and then we need to sit and listen. How am I listening? Am I nodding my head? Am I affirming with a head nod or a shaking of my head, that I'm actually listening and engaged in what the other person is saying? Those two tips, I think, right off the bat, would get people so far in sharing their faith with confidence.
Yeah, I like how in the book you talk about patience, how there's not a one size fits all in terms of you're just going to roll up with this prepared script, right? Because we want to have genuine dialogue with people. I'm a big fan of dialogue, not debate, when it comes to apologetics. And so
I am too. Like the debate thing, it's for some people, it's great. But for me, it's never been something that I'm drawn to. And for me, it's not going into battle. I haven't really ever liked that metaphor either. I recognize that there is a spiritual battle that we can talk about. But when I'm having a conversation with somebody, I'm not viewing that as a battle. And I think apologetics historically has thought of conversations as battlegrounds, and we want to win the war. For me, it's more of a place where we can just get along by speaking like you and I are right now. Even if you were an atheist, I would still be speaking with you this way, and having a really normal conversation with you. Of course, there is this desire to share our faith. And the Bible does tell us to be prepared to do so whenever we're asked to give the hope within us. But you don't have to feel the pressure to share your faith at every meeting point you have with a particular person. Those kind of conversations come up naturally, I think, in genuine relationship.
that's right. Yeah, I like how you call it connecting with people like Jesus did. And, Jesus spoke truth, but he also loved people well, and he had compassion on them. So when I saw you say things like courage and compassion and truth and love in the book, I knew that we were kindred spirits
Yes.
on this approach to apologetics, seeing it as ministry and not like, as you said, like a war, that you're trying to tear down the other person. That's what some people think apologetics is. But we want people to know Christ. We don't necessarily want to argue with them in that sense. We want to present arguments, but not have verbal quarrels with them. And that's interesting because I know that you were a lawyer at one point in time. And I grew up around an extended family of lawyers in the Philippines, my uncles, my grandpa. And so I like to tell lawyers that you can bring more justice into the world, to bring a character quality of God into the world. But talk to us about your experience in terms of how being a lawyer may have helped you think about interacting with all these kinds of people from different backgrounds.
Yeah, I think actually just my experiences in law school helped me with that, because so many different people come to law school. You have young people, you have older people, you have people from all over the country who attend, and then you've got the different varieties of religion represented. I went to a Catholic law school. And I am not Catholic, but many of the students there are. A lot of the professors are Catholic as well. It's been beautiful to see how God used me even when I wasn't thinking about being used. I mean, I kept a Bible at my desk when I was on law review, and I engaged with people in prayer. We had real conversations about things, even if we didn't agree on those things. But lawyers I think we get the rap that we want to argue about everything. But what
Yeah.
we're really doing is we are defending our client, whoever that client might be. So if we can transfer that idea over to apologetics, then we want to defend Christianity and Jesus. And you're kind of a walking attorney then, if you're a Christian, because then you're giving a defense. So you're presenting evidence. Sometimes you call the expert witnesses, right? You might have an academic book that you use, a resource that you're like, I really like this person and how he phrases this. Let me pop that video in, or whatever it might be. And so I think we're all kind of like attorneys when we're talking about defending our faith. We don't have to have a degree to do that. And that's a beautiful thing is if we've equipped ourselves with the Word of God, that's a long ways ahead of many people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you want to know something, though, that bugs me about apologetics sometimes is how
Uh-oh.
we sometimes get a bad rap, that people get this impression, you wrote about this in the book, that apologetics is just about like tearing people down or being
Mm-hmm.
a theobro, as they say today. And I learned from some college girls that women can be theobros too, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that's one of the myths that you talk about in the myths about apologetics, that apologists are all jerks or they just don't listen. They just want to be right all the time. How can we change these stereotypes in the way that people perceive Christians?
Well, I think having podcasts like this one, writing books like the one that I wrote, the going into spheres where we haven't traditionally entered with peace. So over the course of publicity for this book, I've interacted with several atheists, actually, and I've gone on some atheist podcasts. Challenging, but fine. But you won't normally see Christian apologists do that in a way that they just want to have a conversation like this one. There are always going to be people who uh, have had bad experiences with Christians or apologists or the church. That they've been on a certain trajectory, they've seen Christians a certain way, and maybe there's been some confirmation bias throughout their life where one Christian treated them one way, and then that happened again by a different Christian and again by a different Christian, and all of a sudden all Christians are lumped into this group. But if what we could do as Christians in our own circles, so I'm talking about our neighbors, right? The very people we live by, if we could have conversations with them that are genuine and kind and respectful and thoughtful, that begins to change the tide then. And I think we can overcome some of those. I think there are misconceptions in general, and in the apologists that I know don't engage in that way. But there is a reason why we have that perception upon us. We have to be able to grapple with that and admit that, we're not all perfect beings. And sometimes we say the wrong thing or we behave in the wrong way. And we have to be humble and be able to apologize for those instances and ask for forgiveness. And then in other instances, when we hear, Mikkel, about the difficult circumstances that people have had, we need to be able to say, I am so sorry that happened to you. See them as Jesus sees them, with compassion and love,
Yeah.
rather than somebody to be one.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, sadly, some Christians do fall into I'll just come out and say it, the sin, right, of an un-Christ-like attitude when we engage with people.
Yeah.
If we're not treating people as image bearers or we're being condescending to them, being arrogant, that's not representing the Lord well. And we're giving people an inaccurate image of who Jesus is, Um, but I think you started out this book really well with a call to prayer, because I think that's one thing that we tend to neglect as people who work in apologetics, just to do that heart check and just to pray and ask God to use us. And this is a ministry thing. It's a service thing. It's not trying to score points on somebody. Explain how your prayer checklist in the book, how that can help us check ourselves and in terms of our attitude and how we engage with people.
One of the steps that we can take is simply asking God for wisdom. That could take us a long way. The other thing is I love to encourage people to pray for peace in their conversations, peace going in, peace during the conversation, and peace going out so that relationship can continue. The discernment piece, which is like a big $20 word, right? But basically asking God for wisdom about what you should say. You might come in with a bunch of information about a particular religion that this person holds to. And you might want to tell them all the things that's wrong with that religion, everything that they might have wrong in their belief system. But if you ask, God for help, he might say, yeah, you don't need to say any of that. Instead, I just want you to listen today, which is a heart check, right? Because you want to share, but God, I really want to share this information, but God knows all, and you are a part of a larger body and a part of a larger plan. And God's plan for you might not be to share all of that information. That person might not be ready at that time to hear all of that information. Instead, they might just need a positive experience with a Christian. The other thing is prayer for confidence, because sometimes we will hold our tongue and we won't say anything at all because we're just afraid of saying the wrong thing. And I mean, especially in this culture, depending on where you live, it can be a little bit more difficult to kind of be brave. It does take a little bit of courage to share your faith sometimes. And so asking God for that courage to take that step, to be bold when you need to be bold, can really go a long way.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we need to be courageous, but also be compassionate, always doing everything with love. So
Yes.
Pray to God, ask him to help you know what to say, when to speak, when to listen, and then what to share, and then sometimes what not to share at this point, right?
Yes.
So let's talk about some practical steps when we meet somebody who has a whole different worldview, someone from a different religion. You have a series of steps and tips that you give in chapter 10. Talk to us a little bit about that. How do you begin to engage with someone from a different religion?
Yeah, so the first tip is always to just be natural. I don't even know if I said that in the book, but over the course of writing this book, I realized that sometimes we get really worked up and we want to be this ideal, whatever we have in our brains of what an ideal evangelist might look like or an ideal person might be. And then we're not ourselves. And it comes off really weird to the other person.
Right.
And so be yourself, whatever that self is. You can also admit that you don't know everything. That's something else that I love to tell people when they're engaging with people is I don't actually know everything. And I might have to step back and do some research and come back to you on that. So saying I don't know is definitely an acceptable thing when we're talking about engaging with people from other worldviews. But the first step of that is to know your own worldview. I mean, a lot of Christians don't read the Bible. You need to know the Word of God really well. You don't have to have a full understanding of all of the theology and all of the ins and outs of every doctrine that's ever existed, but you should know the core meaning of Christianity. Who are we as Christ's people? Who is God? Who is Jesus? Who is the Holy Spirit? What are the general basic tenets of Christianity? Can you say those in just normal, everyday language? I actually give a very, very basic rundown in my book for people who are like, I don't even know where to begin. I kind of help you with that because I know that it can be a little bit overwhelming. The other thing is to have a good character, right? We've already talked about it. Compassion. If we show compassion toward one another, we are much less likely to engage in that kind of bad character, where we are running our mouths against whole groups of people because of what one person said or because of what one person did. So your character matters. And then finally, don't make assumptions.
Yeah.
Maybe you studied a worldview. Let's just say you studied Islam. And you know a lot about the history of Islam. You know a lot about their beliefs. Maybe you've even read the Quran. You think you have a good understanding and grasp of it. And then you meet a Muslim. Don't assume that you then know everything that they believe.
Mm-hmm.
So what you could do then is say, I read that this is a core belief for Muslims. Is that true for you? Or can you explain that to me more? And that gives them the opportunity then to share what they believe and what their perspectives are. And you might even find that you learned something that day.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so rather than taking it from, hey, I read a book on Islam and I know exactly what you believe already, ask your friend what they believe. You might be surprised. Maybe they've actually never read the Quran. Maybe they don't know if God exists. So you're missing that piece of intel if we don't ask questions and then listen carefully. And some of my go-to is just to add to the great list that you already shared, is to find out what attracted them to that worldview, to that religion, or if they were born into it, what keeps them loyal to it? How do they find this fulfilling, and what keeps them loyal? Why are they still there?
I ask that a lot of Latter-day Saints. When I
Oh,
meet Latter-day Saints, that's a common
mm-hmm,
question I
mm-hmm.
ask is how did you become a Latter-day Saint? Why are you a Mormon? So asking them their origin story. We find those so interesting in the movies, right? We want to know the origin stories of so many characters we love, and yet we don't take the time to learn the origin stories of the very friends that we engage with so often.
Mm-hmm.
And so asking them is a simple way to learn a little bit more about them, but also they tend to ask back. Like
Yeah.
the number of times that I've been asked, like, why are you a Christian? They want to know, like, why are you a Christian? What does it mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's definitely been a full circle story.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And if you ask it in a way that's not adversarial or combative, it's a very
yeah,
welcoming, it's a very affirming kind of thing. Like if someone asked you, hey, Lindsay, how did you become a Christian? That's not an offensive question. We're happy when people ask us things
yes.
like that. We get to share our stories. So if we get curious about other people's stories, they are most likely going to ask you to share
Mhm.
yours too. And then what we want to listen for, I think, is how does the gospel step into what they're really looking for? Because what these other religions are not really able to deliver on is what the gospel gives us, right? Forgiveness, that we can never earn our way to heaven. All these
Mhm.
things that separate Christianity from the great world religions.
Right.
I always like to go to who is Jesus. That's where I'm driving toward. Who is Jesus? When we get to the gospel, it's my favorite thing to do.
I
But
mean, that's a really important question.
uh-huh.
That's the core question is if Jesus is who he says he is, then that's going to change somebody's life.
That's right. Yeah. And it doesn't always have to go there the very first conversation, but we're building those bridges, right?
Yeah.
Again, I love how you put truth and love together, and you give us biblical examples in the book of how to engage. Like you talk about the Apostle Paul and how he was speaking the truth in love. Now, there's one chapter in your book that I thought was really timely for me because I just had a friend from my group.
Oh,
She recently told me about how she was talking with a coworker, and they were at this work event, and it came up that she went to church. And strangely, he began making fun of Christians
oh.
and making some inappropriate jokes and even making fun of Jesus. And she just didn't really know what to say about that.
Mhm.
You have a whole chapter on how to actually respond and how to think through how you could respond in those kinds of situations. What would you say to those who are listening who maybe have had that experience before, or when something like that comes up, what should we do?
Yeah, I'm really sorry that happened to your friend. That can it can catch the best of us off guard,
Mm-hmm.
especially if there's a prior relationship or a prior working relationship even. But it happens. If we can see even just the way that Christians are often portrayed in television or in film, we're not often the best characters. We are sometimes the butt of the joke, and we are criticized in those characters. And
Mm-hmm.
usually there's a major character flaw that is like, see, they said they were a Christian and yet they did this. So let's get that out of the way. Christians aren't perfect, and they are going to make mistakes, and people will make fun of us. So the first thing is to not take it personally. It can be really easy for us to do that. And I myself have stepped into that where I've taken it personally and like, "Oh, I thought she was my friend. Why would she say something like that?" But then if we step back and we ask the question, okay, why would they think this? It's not really about me so much as the belief itself. So then it becomes more about Christianity. And sometimes it's, that that is a wholly different conversation to have, because we've already, touched on this. People have been hurt by the church. People have experienced pain at the hands of Christians, even well-meaning Christians. And so trying to overcome that in one conversation is probably going to be really difficult. So if somebody is saying something mean to you, it's okay to be sad about that, but don't take it personally, because it's probably about the gospel, not about you. That's the first thing, is realizing it's probably not about you. The second thing is to be quick to forgive, which again can be really difficult in that moment, where somebody has really offended the core of your being. I mean, if you're a Christian, Christianity is supposed to be the number one thing about your life. It should bleed into all the other things that we do. And if somebody is mocking the very core of your being, it can be very difficult to get to a space where you want to forgive. But really, you should strive to forgive, because that's what Jesus modeled for us. And Jesus being the ultimate model for bridge building and loving people well, we should really strive to do that. Again, not the easiest task sometimes, because it really does cut to our core. It hurts. It's okay to admit that it hurts. You can even, depending on the depth of your friendship, say, that really hurt my feelings. Friends do that. We do that a lot. I've hurt my friends' feelings. I talk about that a few times in the book, where, I've put my foot in my mouth and I've had to then apologize for whatever it is I said. And so it's okay for you to tell the person, that really hurt my feelings. If you want to talk about it, we can, but please don't talk to me like that again. It's okay to say that. But yeah, don't take it personally. It's probably 95% of the time, and that's just a random number I grabbed out of the air, so don't quote me on it. It's not about you. It's about something that's much deeper than you.
Yeah, that's a hard thing, but reminds me of John 15, where Jesus was very real about this, right? He says, if the world hates you, it hated me first. And if the world persecutes me, they're going to persecute you as well. But as we're ambassadors of Jesus, we do represent him. And so we can't be giving it back to them, right? There are certain things that have a lot of rhetorical force that we are kind of off limits to us, that we can't give it back to them that way.
Sometimes we want to, right? We want the gotcha moment. We want to feel vindicated. We want justice. And we feel like we rightly deserve that. But as Christians, maybe we should take a step back and wonder if that is actually going to be building the bridge or burning it.
Yeah, I think there can be apologetic value to just remaining calm under fire, because that no matter what somebody says, you're secure in your faith and Christianity is true. And then if we're able to develop that compassion for people, we could wonder, what's the hurt that's behind this? Why are they so emotional about this? Or why did they feel the need to make fun? Gone are the days where most people would even pay lip service to the Bible as a good thing, or to Jesus, right? Like people are openly mocking Jesus today. I think I remember you mentioned Amy Hall in the book.
I did.
And one thing she said to me, which I'll never forget the exact way she said it, she said that whenever they're rude to us and we respond with grace, we're giving an apologetic for Jesus' character that people need to see. And that's almost a verbatim quote. I remember exactly how she said that, and I say it to my class a lot. So yeah, I appreciate how you've mentioned her and a variety of other apologists in your book, so people know there's other places they can go. You have a variety of resources there as well. Now, even though this is the Apologetics Guy Show, it's not just for guys. I'm also a big supporter of women in apologetics, and so I know you've been to apologetics events at Biola with people like my friend MJ, Mary Jo Sharp, and with Natasha Crane. We've had her on the show here before. What would you say specifically to the women who are listening who want to get equipped to have better spiritual conversations and get more equipped in apologetics?
Well, that makes me excited. I was the only female in my apologetics program at Denver Seminary. And I remember feeling like, are there actually women who do this? My husband, I think Jay is the one who told me about the inaugural Women in Apologetics conference. But for women who are interested in apologetics, the first is you don't have to get a degree. There are all sorts of things that you can do. I would recommend the organization Women in Apologetics. It's a resource. It's a organization that brings together women who are interested in what we're doing right now, from all different fields. There's a podcast. There's what do they have? They have a blog. We have other things that happen. Lots of writing happens there. So if you ever want to write about apologetics, that's a great place to start too. But we have an annual event that happens as well. And this year it's happening in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. That's it. That's the state. I grabbed it. Mount Juliet, Tennessee, which is right outside of Nashville, the middle of September. It's over a weekend. And then the other thing is you could start following other women who do this. And, you could start Mama Bear Apologetics. You could, especially if you're a mom, that would be a good resource. You already mentioned Natasha. There's Elisa. There's Theology Mom, Krista Bontrager. There are a variety of women who are doing this, and traditionally it's been sort of a male-dominated field. I think it is still a male-dominated field, but it is nice to know that there are women who are doing this and doing it well. Women in Apologetics maintains a list of women who are currently doing apologetics, so that would also be a helpful place to start. And just start grabbing onto those women and saying, okay, what can I learn from this one? And what can I learn from this one? We're all equipped in so many different ways. Some are scientists, some are writers, some are, they give an argument from beauty, they're artists. So there's just a variety of women represented.
Yeah. There's also a great Facebook group that I'll mention that I'm a part of that I was invited to, and I was a little surprised when I was because it said Women in Apologetics, but that's a proper noun. And I am one of the men of WIA, as they have dubbed us. So that's actually, you know what? I will tell you, to be honest, it's the least divisive and most helpful apologetics group on Facebook that I'm a part of.
That's
right now.
Amazing to hear. I'm going to tell Rachel that. She's the president of WIA. I'm going to let her know that you said that.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you'd like to say as we land the plane on our show today?
Yeah, I just want people to know that, Hillary in her foreword to this book said it's not rocket science. And I don't think bridge building is rocket science. I think it really is having this desire to have a firm foundation in truth. So you're equipping yourself through apologetics and reading the word and being engaged in conversation with God. But then this desire to have a genuine relationship with somebody the way that Jesus engaged with them. If we could approach our conversations with this mentality of shalom, desiring wholeness and peace in someone's life, rather than this desire to be combative or to win an argument, that could be a game changer in how we engage with people about our faith. And it can give us the confidence that we need, knowing that we don't actually have to know every argument that's ever existed. We can be ourselves, and there are places that we can go that can help us find answers. And in a friendship, that gets a lot easier to say, I'll come back to you next week on that, and do the work, and then come back to them next week on that. Follow through with what you say you're going to do. But yeah, that's it. I think just having confidence in who you are in Christ and recognizing your role in the greater picture of it. And you can do that through the character that you have as a Christian.
Well, thank you so much, Lindsey, for being on the show today.
Thanks, Mikhail. It's been wonderful. It flew by.
And we thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Apologetics Guy Show. If you like what you've heard here today, please do me a favor and help us out by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. Also, rate us on Spotify. And if you're watching here on the YouTube side, please drop a comment on this video and let us know a takeaway that you had from this video. Or if you have a question about apologetics, I'd love to engage with you in the comments. As always, I'm your apologetics guy, Dr. Mikkel. And until next time, keep the faith.